Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Amara from Giant Stride Media, a growth marketing agency that specializes in scaling natural and sustainable e-commerce brands. And in today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you how to find and target winning interests on Facebook. So let's dive in, shall we? So I want to preface this by saying that this is most useful for people who are just starting out. Because if you've had your pixel for a while or your pixel is seasoned, perhaps you have some purchase data, you had some add to carts or some view content, you can turn those into lookalike audiences, and that will be a good place to start in terms of your targeting. But perhaps you don't have any data to create lookalike audiences. In that case, I would say start with interest. And the way I would advise you to start with interest is, rather than using single interests on Facebook, say for example, you pick a random interest like Tim Ferriss, and that doesn't work for you. Some people might just think, you know what, Facebook ads doesn't work, this is rubbish, and they just wallow in a state of despair. So rather than doing that, rather than just picking single interest to target, what I'll do is I would pick categories of interest, because they're two extremes. One is picking one single interest to target, and the other is picking a bunch of interests without any categories, right? And just bunching them all together and then seeing what works. Now, the thing is, with the single interest, if it doesn't work, you kind of wasted your time, because you could have packed related interest in there. And then if you just bunch a bunch of interests that have no delineation in terms of category, if something works, you're not sure exactly what worked. So what I would suggest is, what I recommend is that, you use a happy medium between the single interest and having a bunch of interest without categories, and just using categories. Say, for example, you can use a category like influencers or celebrities. You could use categories like, books or authors. You can use categories like events, and then find interests that are related to those categories, right? So 5 to 10 interests, and then use those for your testing. And let's say, for example, you test 3 categories. I would say, you usually want to test between, say, 5 to 10 categories. But let's say, you've got 3 categories you want to test: events, influencers, and let's say, authors. And authors does really well for you. Then you want to break down, the category into individual interests to test exactly which one did well for you, right? Because you're able to learn, okay, out of all these categories, which one is doing best for me? And then once you understand the category that does well for you, you can then dig deep into that category to figure out which interest within that category works for you. So I hope that provided a high level understanding, a bit of a preamble to exactly what you need to do when you're testing with interest. But in order to sort of take this a bit further, I'm going to show you exactly what to do, how to find these interests, and how to test them on Facebook. So let's start off by showing you the categories I would suggest you look for interest in. So over here, I've just prepared some slides and questions you should ask yourself, which would help you find the interest you're looking for. So one category would be influencers and celebrities. And the questions you want to ask yourself is, who is your ideal audience and who do they like, follow, and admire, right? The other one is, books and authors could be a category. And within this one, you could ask yourself, what books do they read or what authors do they follow? And the next one is blogs and magazines, right? So what blogs and magazines do they read? What blogs and magazines do they buy? Or magazines do they buy, rather? Movies and actors. This may not be relevant for everyone, but it's also good. Like, your ideal audience might be particularly interested in some types of movies, some genres of movies and actors. So this could be helpful if that's the case. And the same applies to TV shows. Events, for example, if you're in the health and wellness space, you might be able to target Tough Mudder, right? So Tough Mudder is an event that takes place on a yearly basis, obviously not now during Corona, but that's an event that you could target. So you find a bunch of events like that to target. And then what do they buy? So in terms of, what they buy on a general level, you want to look for general brands that are related to what they buy. Say, for example, in the health and wellness space, let's say I'm trying to target people in health and wellness. I might think of Peloton. That's a general brand, right? That's if you're able to target Peloton on Facebook. And then you then want to go into figuring out, what you're selling and who are the competing brands, who are the brands competing with you, and then seeing whether you can target those on Facebook. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to jump into Facebook and show you exactly how to find his interests. So what I'll do is I'll say, start off with going into audience insights. So if you're not using this tool, I'd highly recommend using it, because it can give you a lot of insights into the audience that you want to target. So if you don't know how to find audience insights, I'd say go to your ads manager and then click over here on business tools, and then scroll down a little bit. and you should see audience insights over there. So open up audience insights. Now let's assume that I want to target the biohacking space. So biohacking, if you don't know, is a sub niche within the health and wellness space, right? And it's basically manipulating your biology to give you optimal performance that's over and beyond what you would get with traditional medicine. So let's say, for example, I want to target customers in the biohacking space. How would I go about looking for interest to target? So what I could do is use the framework I've just shown you of the questions to ask. Say, for example, want to find out who do they admire. So I need to think about, who do people in the biohacking space admire? And rather than racking my brains to think about it, what I could just do is pop into audience insights and just type in biohacking, right? And automatically I can find biohacking. And let's say, for example, I know that the majority of my audience is going to be men. All I can just do is just exclude women and just click on men. Now, what Facebook is going to give me is, when I click on page likes, a bunch of categories for people that I want to be following, or for potential interest rather. So say, for example, I'm looking for people who biohackers naturally follow, like, and admire. Then what I could do is just go to public figures, right? Because this is synonymous with influencers or celebrities. And I can pick from here. I could pick, Dave Asprey. I could pick Thomas Delala, right? These are, people in the biohacking space that are well respected. And all I need to do is just come into my sheet and, pop them down here, right? So I've got Dave Asprey and I've got Delala, right? So I've got two names, two potential interests there. So what I want to do then is find more interests like this. And the way you do it is by looking through this to see whether there are other names that you recognize. Say Joe Rogan. No, so they might recommend other names in there, say, for example, Joe Rogan. But what you also want to do is that you just don't want to, unless you know the space really well, you just don't want to copy the names in here and put it in your sheet. So for every name you're going to explore, what I'd recommend you do is actually go to their page to find out whether the content on that page is related to the service or product that you want to promote. So although Joe Rogan is known to dabble in a bit of health and wellness and biohacking, I wouldn't say that his core focus is biohacking, right? So if you just target him, perhaps it won't be super targeted. Now, when you go on Joe Rogan's page, you can see that the majority of his posts in here are related to, like martial arts or MMA, the UFC, and not necessarily biohacking, although there is a component of health and wellness. But I wouldn't say that this is, especially if you're just starting out. If you're trying to scale, then yes, you can test out his interests. But I wouldn't necessarily say that this is a good interest to build a good seed category, right? So that's why it's important to always check the interest in here. So I know, for example, that Dave Asprey and Thomas Delala are good interests for this particular niche. Just be wary that not every interest in here can be targeted in Facebook, right? So these are just suggestions that are being made by Facebook of people who or groups or interests that are related to what you've just typed in over here, biohacking. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you can actually target these with ads. And in order to find out whether you can target these with ads, what you want to do is pop into your Facebook ads manager and then just see if you can create an ad. So over here, just click on create and we can click on conversions and then head over. Right now, I'm not trying to set up an ad. I'm just trying to see whether these interests can be targeted. And then go to ad set and then scroll down. And then over here, click on men. What you want to do is click on the bit that says detailed targeting and then copy the interests you've just found. So these can be seed interests, right? So copy them in here sometimes. Right, so Dave Asprey, sometimes when you copy them, they don't actually show. So it doesn't mean that they're not available. You may just need to use the backspace a little bit to get it to show. So Dave Asprey can be targeted, which is good. So when you have Dave Asprey in there, you're seeing that potential reach. And so what you want to do is, when you're trying to figure out whether you've got a good size or not, I would recommend removing this tick here. So on checking that text box, just to understand exactly what the potential reach is. Later on when you're running your ads, you can tick it. But what you want to do is you want to look for a group that's going to give you a size between say 1 million and 4 million, right? So that's what you're looking for. So in this case, we haven't really got the size that we're looking for. So we're going to keep digging. So Thomas Lawler, going to whip that in there and see whether. So in this case, you can't actually target Thomas, right? So this is what I'm saying. Not every single interest that is recommended within the Facebook audience insights can be targeted. So in that case, what you can do is just, once you put in Dave Asprey, look for suggestions, right? Go over here and look for suggestions. So for example, you've got Mark Hyman in there, so you can add him. So that's boosted your audience a little bit. And by the way, the reason why it's super tiny is that I'm in the United Kingdom. So what if say, for example, you want to target the US, which would probably give us a larger audience. All right, so let's go into here and United States. There we go. That's more like it. So, okay, so we're now at around about 500,000 or 250,000, beg your pardon. And then what we need to do is just find out more influencers that are related to our niche. So I guess Dr. Oz, he's in health and wellness, although not super targeted because it's more general. And then you could just keep going on like this until you find influencers that are related to who you want to target. Dr. Phil. And now we are over 1 million. So now you've got a group that consists of celebrities, or if you like, influencers in this space. And actually, if you're struggling to find people, you might just, go for an interest that isn't super targeted, but it's being recommended by Facebook. So if Facebook is telling me, look, for all these people, you probably want to consider Joe Rogan as well, then it might be worth also going for him. So right about now, we're at 4 million. Usually I prefer my interest to be between 1 and 4 million. So it's a bit over 4 million. So I'll just delete Joe Rogan, as he isn't necessarily a health and wellness biohacking influencer. So now that you've got all these names in here, what you want to do is just copy them, right? And then put on your list. Remember to remove the one that can't be targeted. And now you've got a core group of people who you can target under influencers and celebrities. And you just follow the same process, rinse and repeat for the other questions and categories. So if we're going to be looking at authors, what we could do is, go back in here and then look for authors in here, right? So you want to look for books. For example, you've got authors in here. So yeah, so you've got a good group to start with. So Tim Ferriss, you could start with him, and repeat the process. So over here, delete. Sometimes you just need to go back a bit. And then for authors, ask for suggestions as well. So you basically just do the same thing. So that's what I'll suggest you do in terms of finding audiences to target. So do the same thing for authors, books, blogs, magazines, TV shows, events, movies, if they're relevant for you, general brands, competing brands. And by the time you finish this process, what you will have is a set of groups which you can then target side by side to see exactly which one performs the best. And let's say, for example, influencers performs the best, right? In this case, what you could then do is test out these audiences individually to see which one actually gives you the best performance in terms of purchases. Or if multiple interests perform best, or you can end on in your final audience to scale, you can just bunch up the ones that do really well for you and exclude the one that doesn't do well for you. So I hope this provides you with an idea of how to test interests, because sometimes a lot of people just start with one interest and that doesn't do well and they get really pissed off. or they're just packing a bunch of interests that are super unrelated. And with that, you're not going to get any learnings. There are no learnings in that. So what you want to do is have a happy medium between a single interest and a bunch of interests. Use groups and then figure out which group does well for you, and then dig deep to find out which interest within that group does well for you. So if you'd like more videos like this on how to improve your Facebook ads for optimal performance, do consider subscribing. And until next time, take care.